The night was drenched in shadows, the kind of night where every corner seemed to whisper secrets, and every shadow carried a hidden story. Rain had just stopped, leaving the asphalt shimmering beneath the amber glow of tired streetlights. Elena Ramirez walked briskly down the narrow road that led to her apartment. Her heels tapped steadily against the wet ground, echoing like a metronome of certainty. To anyone who passed, she was just another woman returning home after work. But Elena wasn't just another woman. She was a federal prosecutor, a woman who had spent the last decade dragging criminals into courtrooms, arguing for the silenced, and standing as a shield between justice and corruption. To her colleagues, she was relentless. To her enemies, she was dangerous. And to herself, on nights like this, she was simply tired. The faint hum of a distant siren pulled her from her thoughts. It wasn't unusual in the city. Sirens were part of the night's soundtrack. But tonight it grew louder, closer, until suddenly red and blue lights burst into the street ahead of her. Tires screeched, water splashed from puddles. And in a matter of seconds, 2 police cruisers boxed her in. Doors slammed, heavy boots thundered toward her, and voices exploded in the air. "You there! Stop where you are!" one officer barked. Elena froze. Confusion flickered across her face. She looked around, half expecting to see someone else behind her, someone who fit the urgency of the officer's tone. But the street was empty. They were pointing at her. "Hands where I can see them!" another officer shouted. Her heart began to pound, a drumbeat that echoed in her ears. Still clutching her leather case filled with files, she lifted her free hand slowly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Excuse me, is there a problem? I live just down the—" "Shut your mouth," an officer snapped, cutting her off. His tone was venomous, sharp enough to slice through her composure. For a moment, Elena's mind scrambled for logic. She had prosecuted cases against corrupt officials, against gang leaders, against smugglers, but never had she imagined herself on this side of the law. "Wait," she tried again, her voice breaking with disbelief. "I think you made a mistake. Please check my identity." But her plea was drowned out by the clinking of metal. Cuffs bit into her wrists, colder than the night air, heavier than any judgment she had ever witnessed in court. Her files fell from her grasp, scattering across the wet pavement. Important case notes dissolving into meaningless ink stains under the rainwater. From a nearby balcony, someone whispered, "What's going on?" Another stranger pulled out a phone, recording. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking why the lady was being taken. The mother said nothing, but her eyes reflected confusion and unease now spreading to the small crowd. "Please." Elena's voice rose, desperation clawing at her throat. "Check my identity. I am not who you think I am. I am a prosecutor." But the officers didn't pause. They dragged her toward the patrol car, her heels scraping against the road, her dignity unraveling with each step. Cameras captured her struggle, her plea, her eyes wide with disbelief. One officer pushed her head down, forcing her into the back seat, as though she were some dangerous criminal. Inside the cruiser, her mind spun. Was this a setup? A cruel joke? Or had her work finally made her a target? She thought of the countless criminals she had put behind bars, the powerful men she had humiliated in court. Could this be revenge disguised as law? Through the window, she saw faces, strangers holding up their phones, recording every moment. She wanted to scream at them, "Help me! Tell them who I am." But all she managed was one last cry, her voice trembling yet firm. "Check my identity." The door slammed shut, silencing her to the outside world. What Elena didn't know was that her cry had already escaped, carried through shaky phone cameras, and uploaded within minutes. By the time the cruiser rolled away, sirens slicing through the night, the internet was beginning to stir. A video appeared on social media with the caption, "Innocent woman or criminal? Judge for yourself." In the clip, Elena's voice rang clear, echoing with desperation and defiance. "Check my identity." People watched. People questioned. And soon, people would rage. But in that moment, Elena sat in silence, her wrists burning, her soul screaming louder than her voice ever could. The video of Elena's arrest spread like wildfire. It began with a single shaky clip uploaded by a teenager standing on his balcony that night. Within minutes, it was shared across WhatsApp groups, Twitter feeds, TikTok edits, and Facebook posts. At first, the title was simple: Innocent Woman Screams, Check My Identity, while cops arrest her. But as the hours passed, captions grew bolder, more accusatory. Police abuse caught on camera, this is justice, and finally, prosecutor arrested without cause, is anyone safe? By morning, millions had watched the 30-second clip. Elena's voice, trembling yet commanding, echoed through phones, laptops, and televisions. Check my identity. That line became a chant, a symbol, a cry of resistance. News stations picked it up. Anchors debated the footage. Some replayed it in slow motion, showing the moment when her case files scattered onto the wet pavement like fallen truths. Others zoomed in on her terrified face as she was forced into the cruiser. Who is this woman? One anchor asked on live TV. And why was she arrested with such aggression? Within hours, her name was revealed: Elena Ramirez, federal prosecutor. The irony stunned the nation like a slap. How could a woman sworn to uphold justice be treated like a criminal? If it could happen to her, ordinary citizens whispered, then who among us is safe? Crowds gathered outside police headquarters. Protesters held signs with Elena's words, "Check my identity." The phrase was no longer just a plea. It had become a demand for dignity, a battle cry against every wrongful arrest, every silenced voice. Meanwhile, Elena sat in a cold interrogation room, fluorescent lights buzzing above her, her wrists raw from the cuffs. Hours had passed with no explanation, only blank stares and clipped orders from officers who refused to meet her eyes. Her throat ached from repeating the same words. You've made a mistake. Please check my identity. But now the world was speaking for her. By evening, the hashtag Justice for Elena had trended worldwide. Celebrities tweeted their outrage. Journalists dug into her career, painting her as a relentless fighter for justice. Old clients, people she had once defended, posted videos praising her integrity. That woman saved my life. She's no criminal. Politicians scrambled. Some condemned the arrest, calling it a disgrace to democracy. Others tried to remain silent, but the silence screamed of guilt. Whispers emerged of corruption inside the police force, of powerful enemies who might have orchestrated the arrest to silence her. Elena's family was hounded by reporters. Her mother, frail and tearful, appeared on television. My daughter has spent her whole life fighting for justice. To see her treated this way, it is unbearable. The protests swelled. Streets filled with chants. Check her identity. Justice for Elena. The sound was thunderous, rolling like waves across the city. Each voice was an echo of her cry, each banner a reflection of her pain. Inside her cell, Elena could faintly hear the noise from outside. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope flickered within her chest. She whispered to herself, they heard me, but the battle was far from over. As the outrage grew, so did the resistance. Police officials held a press conference, their faces stiff, their voices rehearsed. They claimed Elena had been resisting orders and was under investigation for misconduct. Their words dripped with cold authority, but the public wasn't convinced. Side by side with the shaky balcony video, their statements looked hollow, fraudulent. One journalist stood up during the press conference and asked, if she was under investigation, why didn't you approach her through official channels? Why drag her off the street like a criminal? The officials fumbled for answers. Cameras flashed. The truth cracked open a little more. Meanwhile, in the digital world, the video continued to grow. Artists created posters of Elena's face with the words, "Check my identity," in bold letters. Musicians sampled her trembling voice into protest songs. For the first time in her life, Elena wasn't just a lawyer or a prosecutor. She was a symbol, but symbols come at a cost. One night, as protests raged outside, Elena was moved secretly to another facility. Officers whispered orders, refusing to explain. Fear returned, sharp and merciless. Was she being silenced forever? Would she disappear like so many others whose names were forgotten? She stared at the blank walls of her new cell, her mind racing with doubts. But then she remembered the voices outside, the chants echoing her plea. She clenched her fists, whispering fiercely, "They will not silence me." And she was right, because the storm outside was only growing stronger. By the end of that week, over 100,000 people filled the capital's main square, candles in hand, chanting her name. The glow of the candles reflected in the night sky, a sea of light demanding truth. International media swarmed. Human rights organizations issued statements. Elena's arrest was no longer just a national scandal. It was global. And yet, hidden in the shadows, powerful men watched nervously. Men she had once prosecuted. Men whose empires she had threatened. Men who had everything to gain if Elena Ramirez was destroyed. They whispered among themselves, "We must end this before it destroys us." But what they didn't realize was that it was already too late. The people had chosen Elena as their voice. And voices, once awakened, are not so easily silenced. The morning of Elena's trial arrived with the weight of destiny pressing down upon the city. For weeks, the streets had burned with protest, chants echoing through every alley and every office. Posters of her face, banners of "Check My Identity," fluttered across walls, and candles lit in vigils flickered in the cold nights. The people were restless. They weren't just demanding freedom for Elena. They were demanding proof that justice still lived. The courthouse stood like a fortress, surrounded by barricades and lines of armored police. But no amount of steel or shields could hold back the tide of humanity gathered outside. Thousands of voices merged into one thunderous cry. Justice for Elena. Check her identity. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. The air was thick with tension, heavy with expectation. Journalists crowded the benches, cameras flashed, and legal observers from around the world filled the gallery. Everyone's eyes turned toward the woman who was dragged into the room in chains only weeks ago. Now standing tall, her wrists free, her gaze unbroken. Elena Ramirez. Her face was pale from sleepless nights, but her eyes burned with unyielding fire. She wore no extravagant dress, only a simple black suit, her hair tied neatly behind her. But in that simplicity, she radiated strength. She was no longer just a prosecutor or a victim. She was a living embodiment of the people's rage and hope. The judge, an older man with lines etched deep into his face, adjusted his glasses. His voice cracked the silence. Court is now in session. The people versus Elena Ramirez. The prosecution, the same system Elena had once served, now stood against her. Their accusation was vague yet venomous. Misconduct, abuse of power, corruption. They painted her as a woman who had betrayed the law she claimed to protect. But the people knew better. And Elena knew the truth. Her lawyer, a young fiery advocate named Daniel Cortez, stood beside her. He was fearless, handpicked by Elena's supporters, and his opening words cut through the courtroom like a blade. "My client does not stand here as a criminal. She stands here as a victim of a conspiracy. And today, we will reveal who truly belongs behind these bars." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The judge raised a hand for silence, but the fire had already been lit. Witness after witness was called. Officers testified, their stories shaky, their eyes darting nervously. Video footage was replayed on the courtroom screen. The moment Elena's files fell, the cry that shook the nation, "Check my identity." Each replay only strengthened her defense, each second of footage exposing brutality and illegitimacy of her arrest. But the true turning point came when documents surfaced. Leaked emails between high-ranking police officials and businessmen whom Elena had once prosecuted. The words were damning. "She's digging too deep. We must silence her before trial. An arrest will ruin her credibility." Gasps filled the courtroom. Cameras flashed wildly. Outside, the crowd erupted, chants shaking the very walls. Corruption exposed. Justice for Elena. The prosecution faltered. Their voices lost strength. Their arguments crumbled. What was supposed to be Elena's downfall was becoming a public reckoning of an entire corrupt system. Elena rose to the stand. For the first time since her arrest, she spoke directly, her voice steady but trembling with emotion. "You dragged me off the street like a criminal. You tried to silence me, to break me. But what you fail to understand is this. I am not alone. Every voice outside these walls, every person who lit a candle, every mother who told her child my story, they are with me, and together we will not be silenced. Not today, not ever. Tears welled in eyes across the gallery. Even hardened journalists, long numb to injustice, felt their throats tighten. Elena's words weren't just for her freedom. They were for every silent soul who had been crushed by the weight of power. The trial stretched for days. Every hour brought new revelations. Financial records proving bribes, secret recordings exposing lies, testimony from whistleblowers who risked their lives to tell the truth. Piece by piece, the puzzle of corruption unraveled until the courtroom could no longer contain it. The entire nation was watching. Finally, the day of judgment arrived. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder. The room fell into a silence, so deep it felt eternal. He looked directly at Elena, his voice firm yet tinged with remorse. After reviewing the evidence, this court finds Elena Ramirez not guilty. For a moment, the world froze. And then, like a dam bursting, the courthouse exploded with cheers. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, people wept, strangers embraced. Outside, the chant became roars, the air trembling with joy. Elena is free. Justice has won. Elena closed her eyes, a single tear escaping. She wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for the people, for the belief that justice could still rise from the ashes of corruption. But victory came with scars. Those who orchestrated her arrest were dragged into court, their faces pale with shame. Yet Elena knew the battle wasn't over. Justice had been served today, but corruption was a beast that never truly slept. Weeks later, Elena stood on the courthouse steps, speaking before thousands. Her voice carried not just across the square, but across screens around the world. They tried to erase me, but instead they awakened us all. Let this not be the end, but the beginning, a beginning where no voice is silenced, no identity ignored, no injustice hidden in shadows. The crowd erupted. Candles lit the night sky once more, not in sorrow but in triumph. Elena Ramirez walked away that night not as a victim, not even as a prosecutor, but as a symbol, a reminder that even in the darkest night, a single cry, "Check my identity," could ignite a revolution. And so the story closed, not with silence, but with a roar.